So many of us are familiar with the classic Imperial Stormtroopers. We see them all over the original trilogy, and they're basically a sign of the Empire. But what if I told you that they weren't the mainline Imperial infantry? Today, let's talk about the differences between the Stormtrooper Corps and the regular Imperial Army. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So the Stormtroopers are iconic. They are basically the face of the Empire on the ground. We see them carrying out basically every duty, from guarding high-ranking Imperial officials, to storming Rebel strongholds and fighting the battles of the Empire. However, they are not the mainline Imperial infantry. The Imperial Stormtrooper Corps, of which all of the Stormtroopers are a part of, is only one segment of the Imperial military. In fact, they are almost completely separate from the main Imperial Army, which have their own types of troopers which were at a lot of times more numerous than the Stormtroopers. So today we'll take a look at specifically who the Imperial Army troopers were and what really makes them different from the Stormtroopers, as well as kind of touch a little bit on what the Stormtrooper Corps is and what it means. So let's talk about what are Imperial Army troopers. Well, we've actually seen them on the big screen very briefly. During the Battle of Mimban, which we see in Solo, the unit Han is a part of is an Imperial Army unit. You may notice they're not wearing white Stormtrooper armor, but instead sort of this drab brown, like, combat uniform. And while it does fit well with the aesthetic of the battle, they were very clearly trying to get like a World War I aesthetic going on. That actually is basically the standard uniform for Imperial Army troopers. The drab coat and the very long helmet. A helmet which, by the way, didn't cover your face. It was less protective than the Imperial Stormtrooper armor. These soldiers were actually remarkably common, and were often the soldiers that rebels were fighting, where Stormtroopers would be involved in very specific types of combat operations. Obviously, very key Imperial units were made entirely of Stormtroopers. Units like the 501st, which were Vader's personal troops, were made entirely of members of the Stormtrooper Corps, which is kind of why that Stormtroopers seem to be the only Imperial ground forces within the original trilogy. The original trilogy focuses on Darth Vader's pursuit of the rebels, and if Darth Vader is attacking a rebel stronghold, he's using his own troops to do so, and his troops were made up of units from within the Stormtrooper Corps. And a lot of other battles were carried out by Stormtrooper Corps units, but not all of them. Several key battles were carried out not by the Stormtrooper Corps, but instead by the Imperial Army. The army which sent, as I mentioned, Imperial Army troopers instead of Stormtroopers into battle. So in a lot of ways, these Imperial Army troopers were actually more common than Stormtroopers. But there are a few reasons why the Empire would be motivated to use Stormtroopers as a more public face for the Imperial military. For starters, Stormtroopers wear uniforms that completely cover their face, which makes them look inhuman. Basically, you can't see or tell what emotions a Stormtrooper is feeling because their entire body is basically covered. They might as well be unthinking, unfeeling droids. And that makes the population of the galaxy a little bit more fearful. If you can't see the face of the soldier that's oppressing you, you really can't tell how they feel about it. For all you know, they're having the time of their lives, you know, sort of pushing you around. And it makes the soldiers less relatable, and they feel more like this sort of bureaucratic government force. But on top of that, studies have shown in the real world that if you cover someone's face and protect their identity, they're more willing to do things that they wouldn't normally be willing to do if they were more exposed. This could help motivate Imperial troopers to carry out some of the atrocious orders they're given while serving in the Imperial military. Both of these things combined lead me to believe that when you're policing a city, you would much rather deploy troops like Imperial Stormtroopers as opposed to the regular rank-and-file Imperial Army. Instead, it seems like the Imperial Army spent much of its existence tied down in a few key conflicts. Things like the battles on Mimban, where there was basically fighting all the time. We do know that they did play some minor roles in the Galactic Civil War here and there, but for most of the conflict, the iconic Imperial Stormtroopers were the majority. And this makes sense because Imperial Stormtroopers were given slightly better equipment. While the Imperial Stormtroopers were given E-11 blasters, an advanced blaster that was pretty well built, Imperial Army troopers were given the E-10, its predecessor, which has a, well, let's say, different reputation. While Imperial Stormtroopers were given lightweight armor that allowed them to move more effectively, Imperial Army troopers, while they may seem like they're wearing less armor, were wearing more bulky equipment. This significantly hampered their ability to move, especially in complex, muddy battlefields like we see on Mimban. But both of these units have one big thing in common: they're all recruits. They're all regular, everyday Imperial citizens who were drafted or decided to join the Imperial military. This is vastly different from the clone army that preceded the Imperial military, which, as the name suggests, was made entirely out of clones. If you want to learn about some of the reasons why the Empire ditched the clones for recruit soldiers, I'll leave a link up here to my video on that. And I want you to let me know down in the comments, if you had a choice, would you rather join the Stormtrooper Corps or the Imperial Army? Would you prefer to wear the sort of enclosed protective armor of the Imperial Stormtroopers, or the more open but sort of clunkier armor of the Imperial Army? And if you have any topics in Star Wars you'd like me to cover in a future video, leave them down below in the comments. And last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.